The snow was falling lightly as Daniel pulled into the driveway, exhausted from the long hours he had spent preparing for a business presentation in New York. The week had been grueling, but he was excited to get back home to his wife, Lily. She had promised to make his favorite dinner when he returned. It wasn't often that they had time for themselves anymore, especially with the holidays fast approaching. Daniel's younger brother, Eric, had arrived the week prior, a last-minute visit before they all drove to their parents' house for Christmas. Eric's charisma made him the life of every gathering, though Daniel often felt the sting of comparison. Eric was carefree and charming, while Daniel was methodical and serious. Despite their differences, Daniel loved his brother and valued their bond, or so he thought. When Daniel walked into the house, it was quieter than he expected. The fireplace was lit, the soft glow illuminating the living room, but there was no sign of Lily or Eric. Setting down his suitcase, he called out, "Lily? Eric? I'm home." No answer. Thinking they were out grabbing groceries, Daniel headed upstairs to change. But as he reached the top step, faint noises drifted from the direction of the bedroom. His brow furrowed, his stomach twisted. Something felt off. He moved quietly toward the door, unsure of what he was about to discover. It was cracked open slightly, and through the narrow gap, Daniel's world shattered. Lily was in bed, her bare back to the door, straddling Eric. Their laughter and moans filled the room, an agonizing soundtrack to Daniel's unraveling reality. For a moment he couldn't move. His chest tightened as rage and betrayal flooded his veins. His wife, the woman he had vowed to love and protect, and his brother were entwined in an act so intimate, so vile, he could scarcely believe his eyes. Finally, his paralysis broke. He slammed the door open, the force rattling the frame. Lily shrieked and scrambled for the sheet, her face pale as she realized who was standing there. Eric froze, his face contorting with panic. "Daniel!" Lily stammered, clutching the blanket to her chest. "This isn't what it looks like. Save it!" Daniel growled, his voice cold and low. He pointed at Eric. "You, get the hell out of my house. Now." "Dan, listen. It's not—" Eric started, but Daniel cut him off. "I said, get out." His voice thundered, reverberating off the walls. Eric grabbed his clothes and fled down the stairs. Lily tried to reach for Daniel, her voice trembling. "Please, let me explain. It was a mistake. I didn't mean for this to happen." Daniel turned to her, his eyes blazing. "Get dressed and leave. Now." "But where am I supposed to go?" she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "You're my husband. I love you. You loved me." Daniel laughed bitterly. "Was that before or after you had sex with my brother in our bed?" Lily fell silent, her sobs intensifying. "Please, Daniel, don't throw me out. I'll do anything to fix this." "Leave," he repeated, his voice ice. "I don't care where you go. Just go." She hesitated but saw the resolve in his eyes. Slowly, she gathered her clothes and left the house, still sobbing. Daniel followed her to the door, locking it behind her. Alone in the silence of his broken home, he collapsed onto the couch, numb. The snow outside fell heavier now, blanketing the driveway where his wife and brother had stood only minutes before. As Daniel stared at the flickering flames in the fireplace, one thing was clear. This Christmas would not be merry. The hours after Lily and Eric left were a haze for Daniel. Sleep never came. Instead, he spent the night replaying the scene in his mind, his fists clenching and unclenching as waves of anger and grief hit him like a storm. He sat in the dark living room, illuminated only by the flickering embers in the fireplace, trying to piece together the betrayal. By morning, Daniel knew he couldn't hide the truth for long. They were all supposed to leave for their parents' house that day. He texted his mother, saying he wouldn't be joining them this year, citing work stress. Her concern came through immediately. "Honey, it's Christmas. Can't you put work aside for one day? We'll all miss you."
"I'm sorry, Mom.
"I just need some time." Her reply came quickly. "All right, but please take care of yourself. Lily and Eric are already on their way." Daniel froze, staring at the message. They had the audacity to go to the family Christmas celebration after everything they had done. Rage bubbled up again. How dare they pretend nothing had happened? Meanwhile, at the family home, Lily and Eric arrived together in Eric's car. His usual confidence was now shadowed by unease, but Lily had convinced him they should still go. "If we act normal, no one will suspect anything," she had said on the drive, her voice tinged with desperation. "Daniel won't tell them. He's too proud." Eric wasn't so sure, but Lily's tears and constant apologies on the way had worn him down. She still held on to hope that Daniel wouldn't reveal what had happened, that maybe she could somehow salvage their marriage, or at least avoid total humiliation. The family greeted them warmly when they arrived. Daniel's father, Robert, patted Eric on the back. "Glad you could make it, son. Where's your brother?" Lily offered a practiced smile. "Oh, he's swamped with work. He said he'd catch up later if he could." "Always the responsible one," Robert chuckled, though his smile faltered. "It's not like Daniel to miss Christmas." Their mother, Evelyn, furrowed her brow. "I hope he's all right." He sounded off in his messages. Back at home, Daniel decided to call his parents. He wasn't sure what to say, but the idea of Eric and Lily parading around at the family house made his stomach turn. When Evelyn answered, her voice was soft and concerned. "Daniel, honey, is everything okay? We're worried about you." Daniel took a deep breath. "Mom, I need to tell you something. It's about why I'm not there." There was a long pause. "What is it?" she asked gently. "It's Lily and Eric," he began, his voice tightening. "Last night, I came home early from my business trip and found them in bed together." "What?" Evelyn gasped. The shock in her voice was palpable. Robert's voice joined in from the background. "What's going on? What did he say?" Evelyn covered the phone and repeated Daniel's words to her husband. Moments later, his deep voice boomed through the receiver. "They're here, Daniel. They just walked in like nothing happened." Daniel's grip on the phone tightened. "You can do whatever you want with them, Dad, but they're not welcome in my life anymore. I thought you should know." "Don't worry, son," Robert growled. "We'll handle this." Back at the family house, the festive atmosphere was short-lived. As Lily and Eric sat down for lunch, Evelyn returned to the dining room, her face pale but resolute. Robert followed, his jaw clenched. "Eric," Evelyn began, her voice trembling. "How could you?" Eric's fork froze mid-air. "What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb," Robert snapped, slamming his fist on the table. "We know what you did. You betrayed your own brother. Under my roof, no less." Lily's face drained of color. It's not what you think," she stammered, her hands shaking. "Daniel misunderstood." "Enough?" Evelyn cut her off, her voice trembling with emotion. "How dare you show your faces here after what you've done to him? You both lied to us." Eric stood up, his usual arrogance replaced by shame. "Mom, Dad, I don't want to hear it," Robert shouted. "Pack your things and get out of this house. Please, just let me explain," Lily begged, her eyes brimming with tears. "I made a mistake, but I love Daniel. I need to talk to him." "You should have thought about that before you slept with his brother," Evelyn said coldly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You have no place here. Neither of you." Eric and Lily had no choice but to leave, their humiliation complete. As they drove away, Lily tried calling Daniel again, but he didn't pick up. She sent him text after text, begging for forgiveness, but his silence was deafening. Back home, Daniel watched the snowfall from his living room window. He ignored the flurry of messages from Lily. His phone buzzed with a new text from his father. "They're gone. We're on your side. Call us when you're ready." For the first time that day, Daniel felt a flicker of relief. He wasn't alone in this. His family had his back. But as he looked at the empty Christmas tree in the corner of the room, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over yet. The day after Christmas, Daniel's phone buzzed incessantly with messages from Lily. Her texts ranged from desperate apologies to clumsy attempts at justification. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. Please let me explain. It was a mistake. I wasn't thinking straight. I love you. Don't throw us away over one bad choice. He ignored them all. But when the knocking came at the door that afternoon, Daniel wasn't surprised to see Lily standing there, bundled in a coat, her face streaked with tears. "Daniel, please," she began, her voice trembling. "You have to talk to me." He didn't move to let her in. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "What do you want, Lily?" "To fix this," she said, reaching for his hand. He pulled it back before she could touch him. "You can't fix this," Daniel said coldly. "You didn't just cheat on me, Lily. You cheated on me with my brother. Do you even understand what you've done?" She burst into tears, her sobs racking her body. "I wasn't thinking. I was lonely, and Eric, he—" "Don't," Daniel interrupted, his voice like steel. "Don't you dare try to blame this on loneliness or Eric. You made a choice. A deliberate, disgusting choice." "It didn't mean anything," she pleaded. "I love you, Daniel. You're my husband, and You had sex with him in our bed, Lily," he snapped. "You don't get to say you love me." Her lips quivered as she reached for his hand again. "Please, just let me come inside so we can talk." Daniel shook his head. "Not a chance. You can go back to wherever you and Eric scurried off to after I threw you out. You're not welcome here." "But Daniel, get off my porch," he said firmly, stepping back and slamming the door. Through the peephole, he watched her hesitate, then turn and walk back to her car, still crying. He stayed there, unmoving, until she drove away. Later that evening, Daniel's phone buzzed again, this time with a call from his mother, Evelyn. He debated whether to answer. He knew she'd be worried after his sudden cancellation for Christmas. Reluctantly, he picked up. "Daniel," Evelyn began, her tone concerned. "Are you all right, sweetheart? We've been so worried about you." "I'm fine, Mom," Daniel replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "What happened?" "Lily said you couldn't come because of work. But that doesn't sound like you." Daniel exhaled sharply. He hadn't planned to tell his parents yet, but the anger and betrayal boiled over. "I didn't come because Lily cheated on me." There was a pause. "Oh my God," Evelyn whispered. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. How did you find out?" "I caught her. In bed. With Eric," he said bitterly. The line went silent for several seconds. When Evelyn finally spoke, her voice was shaking. "Your brother? Are you sure?" "Mom, I walked in on them," Daniel said, his anger rising again. "I don't need any more proof." In the background, Daniel heard his father, Robert, asking what was wrong. Evelyn repeated Daniel's words, her voice breaking. Robert's response was immediate. "They're here." They had the audacity to show up like nothing happened. "They're there?" Daniel asked, his blood boiling anew. "Yes," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. "Eric said you couldn't make it, and they acted like everything was normal." "Kick them out," Daniel said coldly. "Don't worry," Robert growled. "They won't be staying another night." Back at the family house, the atmosphere had shifted. Eric and Lily were sitting in the living room, chatting awkwardly with some distant relatives when Robert stormed in, his face red with fury. "Eric," he barked. "Lily, kitchen. Now." The pair exchanged uneasy glances but obeyed. Once they were out of earshot of the other guests, Robert slammed his fist on the table. "You betrayed your brother," he snarled at Eric. "And you," he said, turning to Lily. "You destroyed your marriage. How dare you both show up here and act like nothing happened?" "Dad, it's not what it looks like," Eric began, but Robert cut him off. "Don't insult my intelligence," Robert snapped. "Daniel told us everything. How could you do this to him? To us?" Lily began to cry, clutching Robert's arm. "Please, we didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake." "A mistake," Evelyn said, entering the kitchen with her arms crossed. "A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. What you did is unforgivable." "I'll apologize to Daniel," Eric said weakly. "You'll stay the hell away from him," Robert growled. "And you'll get out of this house. Both of you." "Please, just let me explain," Lily begged. "Get out," Evelyn said firmly, pointing to the door. You're not welcome here. Humiliated, Eric and Lily left the house, their once proud postures broken. The next morning, Daniel sat at his kitchen table, staring at his coffee cup. He hadn't slept much. The house felt hollow, as if the betrayal had seeped into the walls. His phone buzzed, and he saw it was the lawyer he'd contacted earlier in the week. Taking a deep breath, he answered. Daniel, it's Jenna, she said. I've started drafting the divorce papers. Do you have any additional information I should include? Daniel hesitated. He hadn't wanted to dig into Lily's life, but he had noticed her phone buzzing with notifications from a name he didn't recognize. Ryan. There might be more, Daniel admitted. I think she's been lying about other things. Can you look into it? Absolutely, Jenna said. I'll hire a private investigator. If she's hiding something, we'll find it. Thanks, Daniel said quietly. I just want this over with. Days passed, and Daniel's anger began to simmer into something colder. Resolution. He blocked Lily's number and avoided his family's attempts to mediate. His parents were supportive, but even their sympathy couldn't ease the ache in his chest. Then, one evening, Jenna called again. I've got news, she said. It's worse than we thought. Lily's been messaging another man, Ryan, and it's not just flirting. There's evidence of an affair that goes back months. Daniel clenched his jaw, his hands tightening around the phone. Send me everything, he said. Daniel couldn't shake the sick feeling in his stomach as he reviewed the damning evidence Jenna had sent. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at the printed screenshots of Lily's conversations with Ryan. The texts were laced with passion, deceit, and audacity. Ryan. When can I see you again? I need you. Lily. Soon, but Daniel's coming back tomorrow. I'll figure something out. I always do. He flipped through more messages, the contents growing darker and more explicit. The affair with Ryan wasn't just emotional. It had been physical for months. Worse, it overlapped with her betrayal with Eric. Daniel slammed the papers down, his hands trembling. How had he missed the signs? The long nights out with friends. The sudden distance. The vague explanations about work stress. It all made sense now. Anger bubbled up, but it was laced with a deeper hurt. His wife, the woman he had once trusted more than anyone, hadn't just cheated. She had turned his life into a lie. He called Jenna, his voice tight. File everything. I don't care what it costs. I want this divorce to move forward as fast as possible. Jenna hesitated. Daniel, I understand how you're feeling, but these things take time. Lily may try to contest the terms, especially with this new pregnancy claim. Daniel's grip on the phone tightened. She's lying about that. She has to be. Either way, we'll demand a paternity test, Jenna assured him. But be prepared. People like Lily don't go down without a fight. Eric had always been the golden child of the family, the charismatic one who could charm his way out of any trouble. But the fallout from his betrayal left him floundering in a way he never anticipated. His parents' disappointment stung the most. For years, he had relied on their unwavering support, but now their voices were cold, their calls infrequent. When Daniel ignored his repeated messages, Eric showed up uninvited at their parents' house, hoping for a lifeline. Evelyn greeted him at the door with a tight expression, her lips pressed into a thin line. Hi, Mom, Eric began awkwardly, his once confident demeanor replaced by nervous energy. Why are you here? Evelyn asked sharply, crossing her arms. I need to talk, Eric stammered. Not interested. Robert's booming voice came from behind her. He stepped into view, his imposing presence making Eric shrink slightly. You're not welcome here, Eric. I'm still your son, Eric pleaded, his voice cracking. And Daniel is still your brother, Robert snapped. But that didn't stop you, did it? Eric's eyes darted between his parents. I know I messed up, okay? I've lost everything. My job, my friends, even my own family. I'm just asking for a chance to fix things. Evelyn sighed, her expression softening slightly. What exactly do you think you can fix, Eric? You destroyed Daniel's trust. You shattered this family. Mom, please, Eric begged, his voice desperate. I'll apologize to him. I'll do whatever it takes. Daniel doesn't want your apology, Robert said firmly. And honestly, I don't think it would mean much coming from you. I can change, Eric insisted. Then go change somewhere else, Robert replied, his voice final. You're not welcome here until you've proven you can be better than this. Now leave. Eric stood frozen for a moment, his chest rising and falling as if he were on the verge of saying something. But the icy stares from his parents silenced him. Finally, he turned and walked back to his car, the weight of his actions pressing down on him with every step. Inside the house, Evelyn turned to Robert, her eyes glistening with tears. Do you think he'll ever make it right? Robert sighed heavily. That's up to him. But until he does, our priority is Daniel. He's the one who was wronged, and he needs us now more than ever. Daniel heard about the confrontation from his mother the next day. She called to check on him, her voice a mix of concern and quiet fury. Eric showed up here last night, Evelyn began. He wanted to fix things. Daniel scoffed. And you didn't fall for it, did you? Of course not, Evelyn said firmly. Your father sent him packing. But Daniel, he looked so lost. I think he's finally realizing what he's done. That's his problem, not mine, Daniel replied, his tone clipped. Evelyn hesitated. I know you don't want to hear this, but he's still your brother. Maybe one day. Mom, don't, Daniel interrupted. He's dead to me. The finality in his voice left no room for argument. Evelyn sighed, realizing that her family's wounds would take a long time to heal, if they ever healed at all. While Eric's desperation spiraled, Lily was far from idle. She continued to bombard Daniel with messages, alternating between tearful apologies and furious accusations. I made one mistake. Are you really throwing everything away over this? We can fix this, Daniel. We just need to talk. You're being cruel. I don't deserve this. Each message was met with silence. Daniel had blocked her number, but Lily found ways around it. Emails, messages through mutual friends, even handwritten letters left at his door. Then came her boldest move yet. Lily showed up at Daniel's workplace. It was mid-afternoon when Daniel's secretary, Kate, buzzed his office phone. Daniel, she said hesitantly. Lily's here. She's demanding to see you. Daniel's stomach churned. Tell her to leave. I tried, Kate replied, her voice low. But she's making a scene in the lobby. Security's here. But I thought you'd want to know before. Before Kate could finish, Daniel hung up and strode toward the elevator, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. When he arrived in the lobby, he found Lily standing by the reception desk, her face red with frustration. Two security guards hovered nearby, their expressions professional but tense. Lily, Daniel said sharply, his voice cutting through the room. Her head snapped toward him, relief flooding her face. Daniel, thank God. I need to talk to you. You need to leave, he said coldly, keeping his distance. Not until you hear me out, she replied, her voice trembling. You're ignoring my calls, my messages, everything. You're shutting me out. That's because I have nothing to say to you, Daniel retorted. You've made your choices. Now live with the consequences. Tears welled in her eyes, but Daniel refused to let them sway him. I made a mistake, she pleaded. But I love you. Doesn't that mean anything? Love. Daniel laughed bitterly. You don't love me, Lily. If you did, you wouldn't have slept with my brother, or anyone else for that matter. Her composure cracked, and she sobbed openly, drawing curious glances from the nearby reception staff. Please, Daniel, she whispered. Don't throw us away. Daniel took a step closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. You threw us away, Lily, and if you ever come here again, I'll file a restraining order. Do you understand me? Her eyes widened, and she nodded silently. Without another word, Daniel turned and walked back to the elevator, leaving Lily standing in the middle of the lobby, defeated and alone. That evening, Daniel met with Jenna to review the latest updates on the divorce proceedings. The private investigator she had hired had uncovered more damning evidence. This time, linking Lily to another affair before her dalliances with Ryan and Eric. "She's a serial cheater," Jenna said bluntly, laying out a timeline of Lily's indiscretions. This started long before Eric or Ryan came into the picture. Daniel's stomach churned as he scanned the files. The man in question was a coworker from Lily's old job, someone she had claimed was just a friend. "She lied about everything," Daniel muttered, more to himself than Jenna. "She'll likely try to fight the divorce terms," Jenna continued, her tone professional. "But with this much evidence, she doesn't have much of a case. The paternity test results should seal the deal." "Have we heard anything about that yet?" Daniel asked, his voice tight. "Not yet," Jenna said. "But it's only a matter of time." Just when Daniel thought things couldn't get stranger, another unexpected visitor showed up at his door. Ryan. Daniel opened the door cautiously, his eyes narrowing when he recognized the man standing on his porch. Ryan was tall and wiry, with an air of arrogance that immediately put Daniel on edge. "What the hell are you doing here?" Daniel demanded. "I figured we should talk," Ryan said casually, leaning against the doorframe. "About Lily." Daniel's fists clenched at the sound of her name. "You've got 5 seconds to get off my property." "Look, man," Ryan said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "I'm not here to start anything. I just wanted to clear the air. I didn't know she was married when we started seeing each other." "Bullshit," Daniel snapped. "You expect me to believe that?" "It's the truth," Ryan insisted, though the smirk on his face told a different story. "She told me later, but by then, well, you know how it goes." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You're disgusting. Both of you." Ryan shrugged, unfazed. "You're better off without her, anyway. She's toxic, man. Can't stick to one guy for more than a few months." "Get out," Daniel growled, his voice low and dangerous. Ryan chuckled, stepping back onto the porch. "Whatever you say, man. Just thought you should know. She's not worth your time." As Ryan walked away, Daniel felt a surge of anger and disgust. But beneath it all, there was a strange sense of clarity. He was done. Done with Lily's lies, done with the betrayal, and done letting her chaos dictate his life. The tension in Daniel's life seemed to reach a boiling point as he awaited the results of Lily's claimed pregnancy. Every passing day felt like a weight pressing harder on his chest. Although he was almost certain Lily was lying, the possibility gnawed at him. When the email from Jenna arrived one cold morning, he hesitated before opening it. Sitting at his kitchen table, Daniel stared at the screen, his coffee untouched beside him. Finally, he clicked the message. "The paternity test results have come in," Jenna had written. "As expected, the results are negative. The child is not yours, Daniel." Daniel exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Relief washed over him, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of anger. Lily had lied again, stooping so low as to fake a pregnancy to manipulate him. That afternoon, Daniel decided to confront her one final time. He called Jenna first to ensure his response wouldn't jeopardize the divorce proceedings. "You're well within your rights to confront her," Jenna said. "Just keep it civil. If she tries to escalate things, don't engage. Let the evidence do the work for you." With Jenna's approval, Daniel drove to Lily's temporary apartment, a modest place she had rented after he'd kicked her out. He knocked on the door, his emotions tightly controlled. When Lily opened it, her face lit up with a flicker of hope. "Daniel," she began, "I'm so glad you're here." I'm not here to talk," Daniel cut her off, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. He turned to face her, his expression hard. "I know the truth. The paternity test came back negative." Lily's face fell. I don't understand. That can't be right." "It's right," Daniel said sharply. "And we both know it." She began to cry, but Daniel felt nothing. "Do you have any idea how vile this is?" he continued. "Faking a pregnancy? Using it to try and manipulate me? You've sunk to a level I didn't even think was possible." "I wasn't trying to hurt you," Lily sobbed. I was desperate. I thought if you believed we were having a baby, you'd give me another chance. You thought wrong, Daniel said coldly. This is over, Lily. Completely, irreversibly over. The divorce is happening, and you have no one to blame but yourself. As Daniel turned to leave, Lily grabbed his arm. Wait, please, Daniel. I can't lose you. I'll do anything to make this right. He shook her off, his gaze unwavering. You've already lost me, Lily, and no amount of tears or promises will change that. The fallout with Lily wasn't the only drama in Daniel's life. Barely a day later, he received an unexpected call from his father. It's Eric, Robert said grimly. He's back in town. Daniel's stomach churned. What does he want now? I don't know, Robert admitted. But he showed up here this morning, claiming he's changed and wants to talk to you. Tell him not to bother, Daniel snapped. I'm done with him. Son, I understand how you feel, Robert said carefully, but maybe hearing him out. No, Dad, Daniel interrupted. Eric made his choice. Now he can live with the consequences. Despite Daniel's refusal, Eric was persistent. That evening, Daniel found his brother waiting on his doorstep, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. What are you doing here? Daniel demanded, his tone icy. I need to talk to you, Eric said, his voice low. Please, just give me 5 minutes. Daniel hesitated, then stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Fine. 5 minutes. Talk. Eric shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his brother's gaze. I know I've messed up, more than once, but I'm trying to fix things. I've been seeing a counselor and I'm trying to be better, Dan. For myself and for the family. Daniel crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. And what do you want from me? Forgiveness. Eric nodded, his voice breaking. Yeah, I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. Daniel studied his brother for a long moment. Forgiveness isn't something you ask for, Eric. It's something you earn. And right now, you haven't earned a damn thing. Eric flinched but nodded. I get that. I do. But I'm not giving up, Dan. I'm going to make this right. Even if it takes years. Daniel didn't respond. Without another word, he stepped back inside and locked the door, leaving Eric alone on the porch. Eric's visit left Daniel more unsettled than he expected. For days, the encounter played on a loop in his mind. He hated that part of him still cared about his brother. Cared enough to feel the sting of Eric's desperate plea. But another part, a louder part, told him it was too little, too late. Lily, meanwhile, had gone silent. Her texts and emails stopped after the paternity test results were revealed. At first, Daniel was suspicious, waiting for her next ploy. But as the days stretched into weeks, her absence felt less like a reprieve and more like a vacuum. In the quiet, Daniel reflected on what he truly wanted. He had spent so long chasing stability, building a career, maintaining a marriage, playing the role of the dependable son and brother, that he had forgotten how to focus on himself. One morning, as he sat on the edge of his bed staring at the untouched divorce papers on his nightstand, he made a decision. Daniel called his parents that afternoon, asking if he could come by for dinner. Evelyn's relief was palpable through the phone. Of course, sweetheart. Your father will be thrilled to see you, she said eagerly. That evening, Daniel drove to the house he had grown up in. The sight of it brought back a flood of memories. Christmas mornings by the fireplace, family barbecues in the backyard, and late-night talks with Eric about their dreams for the future. When he walked through the door, Evelyn enveloped him in a warm hug. You look tired, darling, she said, brushing his hair back like she used to when he was a boy. Robert greeted him with a firm handshake and a clap on the shoulder. Good to see you, son. As they sat down for dinner, the conversation was light, catching up on family news, sharing stories about old neighbors. But as the meal wound down, Evelyn cleared her throat, her tone turning serious. Daniel, she began, I need to ask, how are you? Really? He hesitated, then set down his fork. I'm okay, I think. Robert raised an eyebrow. Just okay? Daniel shrugged. The divorce is almost final. Lily's gone, Eric's. Wherever Eric is. It's just been a lot to process. Evelyn reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You don't have to go through it alone, you know? We're here for you. I know, Daniel said, his voice soft. And I appreciate it. I really do. But this is something I have to figure out for myself. Later that evening, after Evelyn went to bed, Daniel stayed up with his father, sitting on the porch with mugs of steaming coffee. I'll be honest with you, Robert said, staring into the dark yard. When all this started, I wanted to wring Eric's neck. Hell, I still do. But I also know what it's like to make mistakes you can't take back. Daniel glanced at his father, surprised. What do you mean? Robert sighed, taking a long sip of his coffee. Before your mother and I got married, I almost screwed it all up. There was another woman, a brief thing but enough to make your mom question everything. She forgave me, but it took years for us to rebuild that trust. Daniel stared into his own mug, the steam curling upward like a ghost. But you worked it out. We did, Robert said firmly, because we both wanted to. But trust me, son, it's a hard road, and it only works if both people are willing to put in the effort. Daniel nodded slowly, his thoughts swirling. A week later, Daniel received the call he had been waiting for. It's done, Jenna said simply. The judge has signed the papers. You're officially divorced. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Thank you, Jenna, for everything. That's what I'm here for, she said warmly. Now go enjoy your freedom. He hung up and stared at the documents in his hands. The weight of the past year seemed to lift slightly, replaced by a strange, bittersweet relief. 2 days later, Daniel found a letter in his mailbox. The handwriting was familiar, Eric's. He debated whether to open it, his anger and curiosity battling for dominance. Finally, he tore the envelope and unfolded the note. Dan, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I needed to say this. I'm sorry, not just for what I did, but for how deeply I hurt you. I've been seeing a counselor, trying to understand why I've always taken the easy way out, why I've hurt the people I care about most. There's no excuse for what I did, and I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know that I'm trying to be better. I'm leaving town for a while, maybe for good. I think we both need space, and I need to figure out who I am without relying on you to clean up my messes. I hope one day we can talk. Not as brothers, but as two people who have both grown from this. Until then, I'll stay out of your life. It's the least I can do. Eric. Daniel read the letter twice, his emotions a tangled knot. He didn't know if he could ever forgive Eric, but for the first time, he saw a glimmer of sincerity in his brother's words. Daniel folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer. He wasn't ready to let go of his anger, but maybe, just maybe, there was a path to healing. If not for their relationship, then at least for himself. Eric's letter lingered in Daniel's mind, despite his best efforts to forget it. He kept replaying certain lines. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm trying to be better. For years, Eric had relied on charm and excuses to escape the consequences of his actions. This letter was different, measured, introspective, even remorseful. And yet, the wounds were still too raw. He decided to shelve his feelings about Eric, literally and figuratively, by tucking the letter in the back of his desk drawer. There were other matters that needed his attention. His future, his healing, and the steady rebuilding of his life. Daniel dove headfirst into a new routine, determined to reclaim his independence. He started with small steps, waking up early for a jog, experimenting with cooking meals instead of relying on takeout, and spending weekends organizing his house. One Saturday morning, he went to the animal shelter, a whim that had been growing in his mind for weeks. We've got just the dog for you, the volunteer said with a smile, leading him to a pen in the back. Inside was a scruffy mutt with mismatched ears and a wagging tail. She's been here for a while, the volunteer explained. Kind of overlooked, but she's loyal as they come. Daniel knelt down, and the dog licked his hand through the bars. For the first time in what felt like forever, he smiled without reservation. I'll take her, he said. The dog, whom he named Penny, became a symbol of Daniel's fresh start. She forced him to get outside more often, explore trails he'd never walked before, and even chat with strangers at the dog park. "You're good for me, Penny," he said one evening, scratching behind her ears as they sat on the couch. She tilted her head, her mismatched ears flopping adorably. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm, but surprises still found their way to Daniel. One such surprise came in the form of a text from Sophie, the woman he'd met at the holiday mixer months earlier. "Hey, there's an art festival downtown this weekend. Want to check it out with me?" Daniel stared at the message, his heart beating a little faster. He hadn't pursued anything romantic since the divorce. He hadn't felt ready. But Sophie's message wasn't heavy or demanding. It felt light, inviting, easy. "Sure," he replied. "Sounds fun. When and where?" They met on a sunny Saturday afternoon at the festival, surrounded by vibrant paintings, handcrafted jewelry, and the aroma of food trucks. Sophie greeted him with a warm smile, her easy laughter breaking through the lingering weight on his heart. "You seem lighter," she remarked after they spent an hour wandering through the exhibits. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Lighter?" "Yeah," Sophie said, her smile softening. "When we first met, you seemed burdened. But today, you're different, more at ease." He glanced down at Penny, who had accompanied them, wagging her tail excitedly. "I guess I've had some help," Sophie laughed. "Well, Penny deserves a medal. She's clearly doing wonders." As weeks turned into months, Daniel found himself reaching out to old friends he had drifted away from during his marriage. He organized poker nights, attended trivia at a local bar, and even joined a hiking group. "You're like a different person," his friend Nate said during one of their hikes. "More present, you know?" Daniel nodded. "I feel different. It's like I'm finally letting go of all the crap from before." "And the ex?" Nate asked cautiously. Daniel shrugged. "She's out of my life. I haven't heard from her since the divorce finalized, and I plan to keep it that way." "Good," Nate said firmly. "She didn't deserve you, man." But the past had a way of resurfacing when least expected. One evening, Daniel received a call from his father. "It's Eric," Robert said. "He wrote us another letter. Sounds like he's staying in Texas for good this time." Daniel remained silent, unsure of how to respond. "Son," Robert continued carefully, "he mentioned you in the letter, said he still hopes to make things right someday." "Someday," Daniel repeated, his voice flat. "Not today, though." "No," Robert admitted. "But it's progress." Daniel sighed. "Maybe for him. But for me, I'm moving on, Dad. I can't keep looking back." Robert didn't argue. "Fair enough, son. Just know we're proud of you for how you've handled all of this." As Daniel hung up, he realized his father's words carried more weight than he'd expected. He had handled things gracefully, firmly, and on his own terms. The scars of betrayal hadn't vanished, but they no longer defined him. Slowly, steadily, he was becoming someone he was proud to be again. Later that night, as he walked Penny through the quiet neighborhood, he looked up at the stars. For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Hope. Months passed, and Daniel's life continued to settle into its new rhythm. Penny became his steadfast companion, Sophie his occasional but welcome source of laughter and warmth, and his old friends the anchor he hadn't realized he needed. But as the wounds of betrayal began to heal, Daniel found himself grappling with one lingering question. Could he ever truly forgive Eric? The letter Eric had sent still sat in the back of his desk drawer, untouched since he first read it. Every so often, Daniel would catch himself glancing at the drawer, wondering if there was more he could, or should say. One evening, after a long day at work, Daniel found himself sitting at the desk, the unopened drawer in front of him. Penny lay curled at his feet, her steady breathing filling the quiet room. "Let's see what he has to say," Daniel muttered to himself, pulling out the letter. He read it again, this time with less anger and more curiosity. Eric's words still stung, but they also carried an unexpected weight of sincerity. The next day, Daniel decided to visit his parents. Evelyn greeted him at the door with her usual warmth, while Robert gave him a firm pat on the back. "How's our grandson doing?" Robert joked, tossing a tennis ball to Penny, who wagged her tail excitedly. "More like my therapist," Daniel replied with a chuckle. After dinner, as they sipped coffee on the porch, Evelyn gently brought up the subject that had been on everyone's mind. "Have you thought any more about Eric?" she asked cautiously. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "He wrote to me a while ago, said he's trying to change." Evelyn nodded. "He's written to us, too. He sounds different. He's still got a long way to go," Robert added, his voice gruff. "But I think he's serious about turning things around." "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "Even if he's changed, I don't know if I can forgive him for what he did." "And that's okay," Evelyn said softly. "Forgiveness doesn't have to mean forgetting. It just means letting go of the anger for your sake, not his." Daniel stared out at the dark yard, the weight of her words sinking in. A week later, Daniel's phone buzzed with an unknown number. He hesitated but answered anyway. "Hello, Dan, it's me." Eric's voice came through the line. It was tentative, almost shaky. Daniel's first instinct was to hang up, but something stopped him. "What do you want, Eric?" I wanted to thank you for reading my letter," Eric said. "Dad told me you mentioned it." Daniel stayed silent, letting Eric stumble over his words. "I know I don't deserve your time or your forgiveness," Eric continued, "but I just wanted to say I'm sorry, again, for everything." Daniel exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. "Sorry doesn't fix what you did, Eric." "I know," Eric said quickly, "but I'm trying to be better. I hope that someday we can talk. Not as brothers, but as people who are trying to move forward." Daniel closed his eyes, the anger and hurt bubbling to the surface again. But beneath it, there was a flicker of something else, something quieter. "I'm not ready, Eric," he said finally. "Maybe one day, but not today." "I understand," Eric said softly. "Thank you for even picking up." After the call ended, Daniel sat in silence for a long time. For years, he had let his anger toward Eric and Lily define him. But now, for the first time, he felt the beginnings of release. Forgiveness wouldn't come easily or quickly, but it no longer felt impossible. That evening, as Daniel walked Penny through the neighborhood, he felt lighter somehow. The scars of betrayal were still there, but they didn't feel as heavy anymore. "You and me, kiddo," he said to Penny, scratching her head. "We're doing okay." As the stars twinkled above, Daniel allowed himself a small smile. For the first time in years, the future felt like something he could look forward to. Weeks turned into months, and Daniel began to feel the quiet hum of normalcy return to his life. It wasn't a dramatic transformation. There were still days when memories of Lily and Eric clawed at him, but they no longer dominated his thoughts. One evening, as he settled on the couch with Penny and a book, his phone buzzed with a text. It was from Sophie. "Hey, I've got 2 tickets to this wine and jazz night downtown on Friday. Want to come?" Daniel smiled. Sophie's invitations were always simple, unpressured. She had become a steady presence in his life, offering companionship without demanding anything he wasn't ready to give. "Sounds great," he replied. The venue was small and intimate, the kind of place where candlelit tables lined the floor and the smooth sounds of a saxophone filled the air. Sophie was waiting at a corner table when Daniel arrived, her eyes lighting up when she saw him. "You clean up well," she teased, gesturing to his crisp button-down shirt. Daniel chuckled. "Had to dust this off." Penny's not exactly a dress code enforcer. As the night wore on, Daniel found himself more at ease than he had been in years. Sophie's laughter was infectious, her stories lively and engaging. During a particularly soft ballad, she leaned closer. "You seem lighter lately," she said, her tone gentle. "Like you're finally starting to let go." Daniel met her gaze, considering her words. "I think I am," he admitted. "It's taken a while, but I'm getting there." Sophie smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand briefly. "You're doing great, Daniel. Really. For the first time, Daniel felt the sting of his past start to fade. The following week, Daniel stopped by a local bookstore to pick up a novel he had been meaning to read. As he browsed the shelves, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Daniel!" He turned to find Lily standing a few feet away, her face a mix of surprise and hesitation. She looked different, tired, thinner, as though the months since the divorce had taken their toll. "Lily," he said evenly. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said, clutching a book to her chest like a shield. "I could say the same," Daniel replied. An awkward silence hung between them before Lily spoke again. How have you been?" "Better," Daniel said, his tone firm. "A lot better." She nodded, her gaze dropping to the floor.
I'm glad.
"You deserve that." He studied her for a moment, searching for any trace of the woman he had once loved. But all he saw was a stranger. "I hope you're doing okay too," Daniel said finally, his voice devoid of malice. Lily's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I'm trying. It hasn't been easy, but I'm trying." Daniel nodded. "Good." Without waiting for her to say anything else, he turned and walked away. As Daniel drove home from the bookstore, he realized something profound. Seeing Lily hadn't filled him with anger or sadness. Instead, it had felt neutral. For so long, she had occupied a space in his mind, her betrayal shaping his every thought. But now she was just a memory, a closed chapter in a book he no longer needed to revisit. When he got home, Penny greeted him with her usual exuberance, wagging her tail as if welcoming a long-lost friend. "Hey girl," Daniel said, kneeling to scratch behind her ears. "Guess what? I think I'm finally free." That night, as he lay in bed, Daniel thought about Sophie, his parents, and even Eric. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had brought him to a place of peace. For the first time in years, he felt ready to open a new chapter. As the months passed, Daniel found a new rhythm in life. Penny remained his loyal companion. Sophie brought warmth and laughter, and his focus shifted toward the future rather than the past. One evening, Sophie invited him on a group hike to a nearby nature preserve. Though hesitant, Daniel agreed, and the day turned out better than he imagined. The trail was alive with autumn colors, and Sophie's friends welcomed him easily. When they reached the waterfall, Sophie turned to him, her smile bright. "Isn't it amazing?" Daniel nodded, but his gaze lingered on her. "It is. I'm glad I came." Later that week, Sophie extended another invitation. Thanksgiving dinner at her place. "Just me, my sister, and a few friends," she said casually. "No pressure, but we'd love to have you." Daniel hesitated, torn between spending the day with his parents or stepping into something new. Ultimately, he decided on both, afternoon with family, evening with Sophie. At Sophie's, the laughter was infectious, and the warmth of the gathering reminded him that life could still be filled with joy. As they cleaned up together, Sophie nudged him gently. "You know, it's okay to let yourself be happy," she said softly. For the first time, Daniel believed it might be true. Winter had blanketed the town in snow, marking a year since Daniel's life unraveled. The divorce was behind him. Lily was a distant memory, and Eric's attempts at reconciliation remained unanswered. For now. One evening, Sophie hosted a cozy holiday gathering. As the night ended, she walked Daniel to the door. "You seem lighter," she said softly. Daniel smiled. "That's thanks to you." On impulse, he kissed her. A quiet, tender moment that spoke of healing and hope. The next day, Daniel finally wrote back to Eric. "I'm not ready to forgive you yet, but I respect that you're trying. Maybe someday. For now, I need space." As he sealed the letter, he felt a weight lift. Walking hand in hand with Sophie through a snowy park days later, Daniel realized he was no longer defined by his past. He wasn't completely healed, but he was moving forward, one step, one moment at a time. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe in happiness again.